My family didn't want me at party because they thought I was a failure, until my sister's boyfriend stood up and revealed a secret that shattered their lives. I was always the shadow in the Rowe family portrait, the disappointment, the one who left. For 8 years, I'd built a life they knew nothing about, an empire of code and connections, while they assumed I was drowning. Then my cousin texted about Mom's 60th birthday party. No official invitation, just 12 words that pulled at every wound I'd carefully stitched closed. I told myself I'd just drop off a gift and disappear again. But when my sister Vera smirked and said, "You're not supposed to be here," something crystallized inside me. They'd written me out of the family story. What they didn't understand about the quiet daughter who vanished in the night was this: I hadn't been running from failure. I'd been building power they couldn't imagine. And now that I knew what was happening to my mother, they were about to discover exactly who I'd become. I've always been the odd one out. That's not self-pity talking, it's just how things were in the Rowe family. While everyone else seemed to fit perfectly into the glossy family portrait my mother insisted on hanging above the fireplace, I was the one whose smile never quite reached her eyes. My name is Delaney Rowe, well, just Delaney now. I legally shortened it years ago, one of many quiet steps I took to build my life in the shadows of my family's expectations. Growing up under my mother Mirabelle Rowe's roof was like living in a museum where touching the exhibits was strictly forbidden. She was a woman who measured success in framed degrees and magazine features. Every dinner conversation revolved around achievements, connections, and appearances. God forbid anyone mention an emotion that wasn't pride or ambition. "Sit up straight, Delaney," she'd say, reaching across the table to adjust my posture even when I was 17. "First impressions are permanent impressions." Or, "The Carmichael girl is pre-med at Johns Hopkins. What exactly are you planning to do with that art history interest of yours?" Interest, never passion. Passions were messy, interests could be redirected toward acceptable pursuits. By 18, I had compiled a mental catalog of all the ways I disappointed her: not pursuing finance like my brother Julian, not having my sister Vera's natural gift for working a room, not understanding that in the Rowe family we didn't just succeed, we dominated. That was 8 years ago. 8 years since I packed 2 suitcases in the middle of the night and left without saying goodbye. 8 years of missed holidays, birthdays, and graduations. 8 years of building something I never told them about. 8 years of silence until my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Griffin yesterday morning: "Aunt Mirabelle's 60th this Saturday. Big party at the house. You should come." That was it, no details, no explanation of why he, not my mother or siblings, was extending the invitation. Just 12 words that somehow managed to pull on every emotional thread I'd carefully tucked away. I stared at that message for hours. Each time I put my phone down, convinced I wouldn't respond, something pulled me back. Not hope, I wasn't naive enough for that. Curiosity, maybe, or the chance to finally show them I'd survived without their approval. I typed 20 different responses before settling on a simple, "Thanks for letting me know." Non-committal, ball in my court. I spent the next day wrestling with the decision. I hadn't seen any of them in nearly a decade. What would showing up unannounced accomplish? Would Mirabelle even want me there, or was Griffin going rogue? In the end, I decided on a compromise. I'd go, drop off a gift, and leave before anyone could make me feel unwelcome. A stealth mission, in and out, no emotional collateral damage. The gift took some thought. My mother had expensive taste but little sentimentality. Eventually I remembered something from when I was 11. We'd been shopping in the city, and she'd paused at a perfume counter, spraying a sample on her wrist. "This was what my mother wore," she'd said, more to herself than to me. It was the only time I'd ever heard her mention my grandmother with anything resembling tenderness. It took some searching, but I found a vintage bottle of the discontinued scent online, not flashy, but meaningful if she remembered that moment. The drive back to Ashenville took just under 2 hours, but it felt like crossing continents. Every mile marker was a year rewound: the old maple-lined Main Street, the brick post office where I'd mailed college applications, the park where I'd had my first kiss. They all looked exactly the same, as though the town had been frozen in amber while I'd been changing elsewhere. The row house stood at the end of Oakwood Drive, imposing as ever with its white columns and perfect symmetry. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive ones, polished to a mirror shine. Music and laughter spilled from the open windows, voices I half recognized. I parked across the street, clutching the small gift bag to my chest like a shield. My heartbeat hammered against my ribs as I approached the front door, rehearsing what I might say if my mother answered. But it was Vera who opened the door, champagne flute in hand, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before her lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, and the calculated pause that followed made it clear this wasn't a joke. This was a bouncer turning away someone who wasn't on the list. I forced myself to keep breathing, to keep my expression neutral. "I just wanted to drop this off for Mom," I said, holding out the gift bag for her birthday. Vera took it with 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate her. How thoughtful. After 8 years of nothing. I ignored the barb. "Tell her happy birthday from me." "I'll add it to the pile," she said, already closing the door. "Thanks for stopping by." And that was it. The door clicked shut before I could glimpse any of the party beyond her. I stood there for a moment, the spring breeze suddenly cold against my face, before turning and walking back to my car with as much dignity as I could muster. I hadn't expected a warm welcome, I hadn't expected anything, really, but somehow being dismissed at the door by my younger sister still felt like a punch to the gut. As I drove away, I reminded myself why I'd come in the first place, not for their acceptance, but to prove to myself I could face them on my own terms, even if those terms meant standing on the other side of a door that would always be closed to me. I drove straight to the Lakeview Hotel on the edge of town. I hadn't planned to stay overnight, but the thought of making the drive back home in my current state seemed unwise. My hands were still shaking as I checked in and asked for a room facing the water. The hotel was exactly as I remembered it, the same faded blue carpet, the same painting of sailboats above the reception desk. The town's only luxury accommodation hadn't changed in a decade, which was oddly comforting. In my room, I kicked off my heels and sat cross-legged on the bed, watching the sun set over the lake. I wasn't upset exactly, disappointed, maybe, but not surprised. I didn't come back to be accepted, I repeated to myself like a mantra. I came to prove I could. It's strange how memories resurface when you return to old places. Sitting there, I found myself thinking about the last time I'd been in Ashenville, the night I left for good. I was supposed to be finishing my sophomore year at Preston University, studying finance like a good row. But 3 months earlier, I had quietly dropped out after reporting my economics professor for sexual harassment. The investigation that followed turned ugly. He had tenure, connections, and a narrative about me being a troubled student seeking attention. The scandal became about me, not him. I never told my family. I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in my mother's eyes, to hear her ask what I'd done to invite such behavior. So I pretended everything was fine, made excuses about why they couldn't visit campus. When the truth finally threatened to surface, I made a decision. I withdrew from school, packed my essentials, and disappeared to start over. I shortened my last name legally from Rowe to just Delaney, a small but significant change that made me harder to find, yet maintained some connection to who I'd been. At 23, after working odd jobs and taking night classes in computer science, I launched Etherlock, a boutique tech startup specializing in remote data security for small businesses. It started small, just me and 2 part-time coders working out of my apartment. Those early days were a blur of sleepless nights, ramen dinners, and rejections. For every client who signed on, 20 turned us down. My first business partner stole our seed money and disappeared. The second tried to push me out of my own company once we started turning a profit. But I survived. More than survived, I thrived. By 26, Etherlock had 30 employees and a real office. By 28, we had clients in 11 countries and a waiting list. I built something that mattered, something entirely mine, and I never told my family about any of it. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my memories. Another text from Griffin, "Why'd you leave so fast? Didn't even see you." I frowned at the screen. Was he playing some kind of game? Vera answered the door. Made it clear I wasn't invited, I typed back. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, what? Mom's been asking if anyone's heard from you. I thought you knew. That gave me pause. Why would Mirabelle ask about me if she hadn't wanted me there? Was Vera running interference? Before I could respond, Griffin sent another message. This family, I swear. Come back tomorrow. Brunch at 11. I'll make sure you get in. I set my phone down without answering. I needed to think. Hungry and restless, I headed down to the hotel bar. It was nearly empty, just a few business travelers hunched over laptops and drinks. I ordered a glass of wine and opened my own laptop, intending to catch up on work emails. Delaney. I looked up to see a tall, dark-haired man approaching my table. It took me a moment to place him, Auden Ely, a quiet guy who'd been a year ahead of me in high school. We'd had AP chemistry together, had been lab partners for a semester. Auden, I said, surprised he'd recognized me. It's been a while, almost a decade, he said, smiling slightly. Mind if I join you? I gestured to the empty chair across from me. He looked good, better than in high school where he'd been all awkward angles and nervous energy. Now he carried himself with quiet confidence, though there was still something reserved in his demeanor. What brings you back to Ashenville? He asked. I thought you'd left for good. Just a quick visit, I said. My mother's birthday. Something flickered across his face. Mirabelle's party. I was just there. I raised an eyebrow. You were? He nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable. I've been dating Vera for about 5 months. I didn't realize you were that Delaney. She never mentions you. The pieces clicked into place. Of course Vera would date someone like Auden, intelligent, probably successful, the kind of man who looked good in family photos. Small world, I said, taking a sip of wine to hide my discomfort. She said you abandoned the family, he said carefully, that you couldn't handle the pressure of living up to the Roe name. I laughed, I couldn't help it. Is that the official story? I'm guessing there's more to it, he said. There always is. I studied him. Are you happy with Vera? He didn't answer immediately, which was an answer in itself. It's complicated. We talked for another hour, careful, circling conversations about the past decade. I kept things vague, saying only that I worked in tech and lived in the city. He told me he'd gotten his MBA and was looking to make a career change. Too many years doing what was expected, he said. I'm ready to build something meaningful. When we finally said goodnight, I felt strangely unsettled. There had been something in his eyes when he looked at me, recognition of a sort that went beyond our brief high school acquaintance. Back in my room, I checked my work email one last time before bed. Among the usual messages was one from Marcus, one of my junior VPs in charge of hiring. Interesting application came through for the security analyst position. Guy's overqualified but specifically requested an entry-level role. Thought you might want to look at his resume. Name's Auden Ely. I stared at the screen, a chill running down my spine. Auden had applied to my company. The boyfriend of the sister who pretended I didn't exist wanted to work for me. That couldn't be a coincidence. Morning light streamed through the hotel curtains I'd forgotten to close, pulling me from a restless sleep. I'd spent half the night reviewing Auden's resume, looking for clues to his motivation. On paper, he was impressive, MBA from Cornell, 3 years at a top consulting firm, technical certifications that far exceeded what we required for the position. But his employment history had gaps he'd tried to conceal, and his references were notably vague. Why would someone with his credentials apply for an entry-level job at a mid-sized security firm? More importantly, did he know who owned Etherlock? I'd always kept a low profile, avoided industry events, declined interviews. My official company bio used only my first initial, D. Rowe, founder and CEO. It wasn't exactly a secret, but it wasn't public knowledge either. I tried to remember if I'd ever mentioned my interest in computer science to Auden back in high school. We'd been friendly, but not close. I couldn't imagine how he'd made the connection between me and my company. My phone rang, Griffin's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hey," I said cautiously. "Where are you?" He sounded tense. "Are you still in town?" "At the Lakeview." "Why? Can we meet?" "There's stuff you should know, about yesterday, about everything." We agreed to meet at Blackbird Cafe, a quiet spot on the edge of town where we were unlikely to run into family friends. Griffin was waiting when I arrived, fidgeting with a paper napkin he'd torn into tiny pieces. My cousin had always been the one I got along with best in the family, 2 years older than me. He'd protected me from the worst of Vera's teenage cruelty. He looked older now, tired around the eyes. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said as soon as I sat down. "I had no idea Vera would pull that stunt. What exactly happened?" I asked. "Your texts were confusing." He ran a hand through his hair. "I told Mom you might come. She seemed, I don't know, nervous but not upset. Then Vera took over like she always does now. Said you weren't welcome, that you just bring drama. And Mom went along with it." Griffin looked uncomfortable. "Things have changed. Vera's taken over as the family PR manager, as she calls it. She controls who sees Mom, what information gets out. She's got everyone convinced she's just being protective." "Protective of what?" I asked. "Mom's always been able to take care of herself." He didn't answer directly. "The family's having financial problems. Did you know that?" I shook my head. "The market crashed a few years back. Mom made some bad investments, nearly lost the house." He twisted his coffee cup. "I had to bail them out." This was news to me. My mother had always been financially savvy, managing the family money after my father died when I was 10. The thought of her making reckless investment decisions didn't track. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked, though I knew the answer. I had made myself unreachable. "Would you have come back if we had?" Griffin asked quietly. I didn't have an answer for that. After coffee with Griffin, I wasn't ready to return to the hotel. I decided to walk through my old neighborhood, a detour down memory lane I hadn't planned. The houses looked smaller than I remembered, the trees taller. I passed my old high school, the park where we used to sneak cigarettes, the corner store where the owner always gave me an extra piece of candy with my change. Delaney Row. I turned to see a woman jogging toward me, hand raised in greeting. It took me a moment to recognize Kellen Morris, my childhood best friend. We'd been inseparable from kindergarten through 10th grade until her family moved to Chicago. She must have moved back at some point. "Kellen," I said, genuinely happy to see a friendly face. "You're back in Ashenville?" 3 years now," she said, hugging me briefly. "Teaching at the high school, if you can believe it." "What about you?" "Just visiting, just for the weekend." "My mother's birthday, right?" She studied my face. "You okay? You look tense." That was the thing about old friends, they could still read you. "Family stuff," I said with a shrug. "Nothing new." We walked together for a while, catching up. She was married now, had a 4-year-old daughter. When the conversation turned to my family, her expression grew serious. "I'm surprised you came back after everything," she said, "especially with what happened to your mom." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? What happened to my mom?" Kellen's eyes widened. "You don't know. She had some kind of breakdown 2 years ago, started behaving erratically, making strange decisions. There were rumors she might lose the house." Griffin stepped in, from what I heard. The second confirmation of financial troubles in one day. Something wasn't adding up. "No one told me," I said quietly. Kellen squeezed my arm. "I'm sorry. I assumed you knew." We parted ways at the next corner, promising to stay in touch this time. As I walked back to the hotel, my mind raced. A breakdown? Financial problems? Vera controlling access to my mother? I'd thought I was done caring about the Rowe family drama, but clearly I was wrong. Back at the Rowe house, someone else was thinking about me too. Auden had returned to pick up a jacket he'd left behind, finding the house quiet after the party. In the dining room, gifts were piled on a side table, expensive bottles of wine, designer accessories, jewelry boxes. At the bottom of the pile, still in the small gift bag, was the perfume I'd brought, unopened, unacknowledged. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands, and slipped it into his pocket before leaving. Meanwhile, my phone rang as I entered my hotel room. My executive assistant's name lit up the screen. Claire, everything okay? It was Sunday. She never called on weekends unless something was wrong. You need to see this, she said without preamble. She forwarded an email, a link to a small industry gossip blog I rarely paid attention to. The headline made my blood run cold. Etherlock's mysterious founder, hidden sources connect D. Rowe to prominent Ashenville family. I scrolled through the article, which was mostly speculation and vague insider information, but there was enough truth there to make me nervous. Someone had been talking, someone who knew both my past and my present. The knock on my door came just as I finished reading. I approached cautiously, checked the peephole, and felt my heart skip. Auden stood in the hallway, looking nervous but determined. I opened the door. In his hand was the gift bag I'd brought for my mother. Why didn't you tell them? He asked simply. There was no point pretending I didn't know what he meant. He'd figured it out somehow, the connection between Delaney Rowe, the family disappointment, and D. Rowe, the founder of Etherlock. Why would I? I countered, stepping aside to let him in. They made it clear a long time ago that I wasn't what they wanted. He placed the perfume bottle on the desk. Your mother cried when she saw this, after Vera told her you just left it and ran off. That's not what happened. I know. His expression was grim. I was there when Vera answered the door. I heard what she said to you. I studied him, trying to understand his angle. Why are you here, Auden? Why did you apply to my company? He sat down heavily on the edge of the desk chair. Because I need a way out, and I think you might need a way in. What are you talking about? Vera's blackmailing me. He couldn't meet my eyes. She found out about something in my past, a mistake I made. She's threatened to make it public if I break up with her. And you thought working for her estranged sister was the solution? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. I didn't know you owned Etherlock when I applied. I just knew they had a good reputation, and I needed a fresh start away from her influence. He finally looked up. Finding out it was your company, that was just luck. Or fate, maybe. I wasn't sure I believed in fate, but I recognized desperation when I saw it. What's Vera holding over you? It doesn't matter. What matters is what she's doing to your mother. He leaned forward. Delaney, your mother isn't just upset or lonely. She's sick, early-stage dementia. Vera's been hiding it, controlling her medication, isolating her from people who might notice. The room seemed to tilt slightly. That's a serious accusation. I can prove it. His voice was steady now. I've been collecting evidence for months, financial documents, medical records she's hidden, recordings of her threatening your mother's nurse to keep quiet. Why would Vera do this? I asked, though the answer was already forming in my mind. Money, control. She's been systematically taking over your mother's finances, redirecting assets, using her declining mental state to manipulate her into signing things she doesn't understand. I thought about my mother, proud, sharp-minded Mirabelle, being manipulated by her own daughter. Despite everything, the thought made my chest ache. If what you're saying is true, why haven't you gone to the police? Or to Julian? Julian's barely around, and when he is, Vera makes sure he only sees your mother on her good days. As for the police, he shook his head. Vera's engaged to Detective Bauer's son now. The police won't help. I paced the small hotel room, mind racing. So you thought what? That I'd swoop in and save the day, hire you out of the goodness of my heart? I thought you deserved to know the truth. He stood. What you do with it is up to you, but I need out, and your company is my best chance at starting over. I stopped pacing and faced him. Come to my office tomorrow, the real one, not the address on the website. I'll text you the details. You're considering hiring me? He looked surprised. I'm considering your story, I corrected. But I need to see your evidence, and I need to know exactly what Vera has on you before I decide anything. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, turning the perfume bottle over in my hands. The familiar scent, roses and sandalwood with a hint of vanilla, transported me back to that day with my mother, the rare moment of connection. I'd come to Ashenville thinking I was completely detached from my family. Now I realized the truth was more complicated. I still cared about my mother, about Griffin, even about Julian. I cared about the house I grew up in and the memories it held. I cared enough to find out what was really happening behind that closed door. The next morning, I texted Auden the address of Etherlock's headquarters in the city, not the decoy office we used for mail and client meetings, but the converted warehouse where the real work happened. I arrived early, watching from my corner office as he entered the lobby promptly at 9. His expression as he took in the space, modern, open, humming with activity, was worth the early wake-up, shock followed by understanding. This wasn't just a small security firm. This was a serious operation. Claire showed him up to my office, her professional smile masking her curiosity. I'd told her only that he was a potential hire with a complicated background. So this is the real Etherlock, he said, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the view of the city skyline. This is it. I gestured for him to sit. Now tell me everything. Start with what Vera has on you, and don't leave anything out. He took a deep breath. 5 years ago I was working at Meridian Consulting. We had a client, a pharmaceutical company, developing a new drug. I found evidence in their trial data that they were covering up serious side effects. When I brought it to my superiors, they buried it. The drug went to market, and I leaked the evidence to a journalist. His voice was steady. The drug was pulled. The company faced massive lawsuits, and Meridian lost their biggest client. They knew it was me but couldn't prove it, until Vera somehow got hold of emails between me and the reporter. How did she find them? I don't know. But she made it clear that if I tried to leave her, she'd make sure everyone knew, I'd be blacklisted in the industry. So you found Etherlock, a company that specializes in data security, and applied for a job. He nodded. I figured if anyone would understand ethical whistleblowing, it would be a security firm. I leaned back in my chair. And what about my mother? What's really going on? Auden pulled a flash drive from his pocket. It started about 2 years ago, small things at first, forgetfulness, confusion. The doctors diagnosed early onset dementia, treatable, manageable with the right care. But Vera saw an opportunity. He plugged the drive into my computer and opened a folder of documents, bank statements showing large transfers, medical reports with conflicting information, power of attorney papers with signatures that didn't quite match. She's been medicating your mother more heavily than prescribed, keeping her docile. She convinced her that Julian is too busy to be bothered with trivial family matters and that you abandoned them when things got difficult. And Griffin, where does he fit in? He helped financially when your mother nearly lost the house, but Vera's kept him at arm's length since then. He travels a lot for work, only comes home for holidays and birthdays. I scrolled through the documents, feeling sick. She's stealing from our mother. Not just stealing, Auden said quietly. She's taken out a mortgage on the house using your mother's forged signature. That money's disappeared. If something isn't done soon, your mother could lose everything. I pushed away from the desk, standing to look out over the city. This was no longer about an uninvited daughter or family squabbles. This was elder abuse, fraud, possibly worse. I need to think, I said finally. But I want you to understand something, Auden. If I hire you, if I help you, it won't be out of sympathy. It will be because I need someone on the inside, someone who can help me protect my mother, whether she wants my help or not. He nodded slowly. I understand. And if you're lying to me, if this is some elaborate scheme cooked up by Vera to get to me or my company, I will bury you so deep professionally you'll never work in any industry again. Are we clear? Crystal clear. He met my gaze steadily. But I'm not lying. And I think you know that. After he left, I called Griffin. We need to talk. It's about Mom and Vera, and it's worse than you think. He agreed to meet me halfway between Ashenville and the city the next day. I spent the night reviewing Auden's evidence, making calls to trusted contacts in elder law and financial crimes. By morning, I had the beginnings of a plan. It was time to return to the Rowe estate, but this time not as the unwanted daughter slinking away at the first sign of rejection. This time I would walk through the front door with purpose, whether they wanted me there or not. The next morning I woke with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. After reviewing Auden's evidence deep into the night, I'd made my decision. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about protecting my mother from someone who was supposed to love her. My phone buzzed with a text from Griffin confirming our meeting spot, a quiet diner halfway between Ashenville and the city. I needed him on my side if this was going to work. Before heading out, I made 2 calls, one to my company's legal team instructing them to prepare paperwork for Auden's hire, and another to a private investigator I'd worked with before. The PI had helped me vet potential clients with security concerns, now I needed him to verify Auden's claims before I fully committed to this plan. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few truckers at the counter and an elderly couple in a corner booth. Griffin sat by the window, fidgeting with a napkin dispenser. He looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from carrying secrets. You sounded serious on the phone, he said as I slid into the booth. What's going on? I met with Auden yesterday, I said, keeping my voice low. He showed me some disturbing things about what Vera's been doing. Griffin's face went still. What kind of things? I told him everything, the documents, the forged signatures, the mortgage, the manipulation of Mirabelle's medication. With each detail, his expression darkened. I knew something was off, he said when I finished. Mom's been so foggy lately, worse than her usual memory lapses. But dementia, and Vera doing all this? He shook his head. How did I miss it? You're not there every day, I said, trying to ease his guilt. And Vera's been careful, making sure Mom seems normal when family visits. What are you planning to do? I need to see Mom for myself, assess how bad things really are, I said, stirring my coffee and watching the cream swirl. And then I'm going to stop Vera, with or without the family's blessing. Griffin rubbed his temples. You can't just storm in there. Vera's got Mom convinced you abandoned the family. She'll never listen to you over her own daughter. That's why I need your help. I need you to get me documents, anything with Mom's signature from before all this started, bank statements, medical records, anything Vera might have tampered with. He looked uncertain. That means going behind Vera's back. If she catches me, she's stealing from our mother, Griffin, manipulating her, possibly endangering her health. What's worse, Vera getting angry, or Mom losing everything? After a long moment, he nodded. Okay, I'll help. But we need to be smart about this. When do you want to see Mom? There's a family brunch this weekend, right? The one you mentioned before. Sunday at 11. Vera's insisting on it, says it's for Mom, but it's really just her showing off to the extended family. Perfect, I said. I'll be there. And this time I won't be turned away at the door. We finalized our plans over a second cup of coffee. Griffin would gather what documents he could without raising suspicion. I would come to the brunch uninvited, assess my mother's condition, and confront Vera only if the moment was right. As we were leaving, Griffin grabbed my arm. Del, there's something else you should know. Julian's flying in for the brunch. He hasn't seen Mom in months. Julian, my older brother, always Dad's favorite, always following the prescribed Rowe path, private school, Yale, Wall Street. We'd been close as kids before he turned into a mini version of our father. By the time I left home, he'd become a stranger who looked at me with something between pity and contempt. Does he know about any of this? I asked. Griffin shook his head. Vera keeps him even more in the dark than me, tells him Mom's just getting older, nothing to worry about. He believes her because it's easier than flying home to check. Another piece of the puzzle slid into place. Vera had systematically isolated Mirabelle from everyone who might notice something was wrong, me through estrangement, Griffin through limited contact, Julian through reassurances that all was well. Back at Etherlock's headquarters, I found Auden waiting in the lobby. He looked different today, more confident, less haunted. He'd shaved, traded yesterday's rumpled suit for clean dark jeans and a button-down. It was as if the simple act of sharing his burden had lightened him. "Did you think I wouldn't show?" he asked as I approached. "I thought you might reconsider the risk," I replied honestly. He shook his head. "There's no going back now." I led him up to my office, aware of the curious glances from my employees. It wasn't often I personally escorted visitors through the building. Once the door closed behind us, I handed him a folder. "Employment contract. You start immediately as a security consultant. The position comes with an apartment in the company building until you find your own place." He flipped through the pages, eyebrows rising at the salary figure. "This is generous." "It's fair for someone with your qualifications," I said. "And it comes with conditions." I assumed it would. "You'll maintain your relationship with Vera for now." I held up a hand when he started to object. "Not indefinitely, just until we have everything we need." "You'll be my eyes and ears in that house." He reluctantly nodded. "You'll document everything, conversations, medications, visitors, any documents you can access without getting caught. You'll report directly to me, not through company channels." "And if Vera suspects something?" "She won't," I said with more confidence than I felt. "She thinks you're desperate to keep your secret. She has no reason to doubt your loyalty." Auden looked troubled. "You're asking me to spy on your family." "I'm asking you to help me protect my mother," I corrected. "Unless you've changed your mind." "No." His voice was firm. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." We spent the next few hours going over details, what to look for, how to communicate securely, what to do if things went wrong. I gave him a company phone with enhanced security features, showed him how to document evidence without leaving digital footprints. By the time he left, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my office floor. I stayed behind, staring out at the city lights, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Was I using my mother's condition as an excuse to re-enter a family that had rejected me? Was I putting Auden at risk to satisfy my own need for answers? No. The evidence was clear. Vera was exploiting our mother's vulnerability for her own gain. Someone had to stop her, and I was the only one with the resources and distance to do it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen my mother before leaving Ashenville, how she'd looked at me with disappointment when I told her I was taking time off from college. "Ro, don't quit," she'd said. "Your father would be ashamed." Those words had cut deep, had been part of why I stayed away so long. Now I wondered if she'd even remember saying them, if she'd remember me at all. The next day brought confirmation from my PI. Everything Auden had told me checked out. Vera had indeed been manipulating our mother's finances, had taken out a mortgage using a forged signature, had been restricting visitors and controlling information. The evidence was damning. I spent the rest of the week preparing. I had my legal team draw up documents for medical power of attorney, contacted specialists in elder care and dementia treatment, and arranged for a security detail to accompany me to Ashenville if needed. By Sunday morning, I was ready. I chose my outfit carefully, a simple navy dress, pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, low heels, professional but not intimidating. I wanted to look like someone who could be trusted with important matters. The drive to Ashenville felt shorter this time, my purpose sharpening each mile. I wasn't coming as a supplicant bearing gifts. I was coming as someone ready to fight for what mattered. Cars lined the driveway again. Sunday brunch apparently warranted almost as much display as a milestone birthday. I recognized Griffin's sedan and spotted a rental car that likely belonged to Julian. I parked on the street, took a deep breath, and walked up to the front door with steady steps. This time I didn't knock. I used the key Griffin had slipped me during our meeting, an old spare he'd kept when he moved out. The key that meant I wasn't asking for entry, I was claiming my right to be there. The house smelled the same, lemon polish and fresh flowers, the scent of my childhood. Voices drifted from the dining room, the clink of silverware and crystal. I followed the sound, each step feeling both foreign and familiar. I paused in the doorway, taking in the scene, a dozen family members seated around the long table, Vera at one end playing hostess, my mother at the other looking smaller than I remembered, more fragile. Julian sat at her right hand, Griffin at her left. Auden was beside Vera, his face carefully neutral as he noticed me. It was Vera who saw me first, her champagne glass freezing halfway to her lips. "You," she said, the single word slicing through conversation like a blade. Every head turned. My mother squinted, confused. Julian's expression hardened. Griffin, bless him, looked relieved. "Hello, everyone," I said calmly. "Sorry I'm late." "You're not late," Vera said, recovering quickly. "You're not invited, again. Didn't think you'd try this twice." I didn't respond to her. Instead, I walked directly to my mother, kneeling beside her chair. "Hi, Mom," I said softly. "It's Delaney, your daughter." Something flickered in her eyes, recognition, confusion, I couldn't tell. She reached out a hesitant hand to touch my face. "Danny," she said, her voice uncertain. "You're here?" "I'm here," I confirmed, covering her hand with mine. It felt thin, the skin like tissue paper. "I've come home." "You can't just walk in here," Julian said, standing. "After 8 years of nothing, you think you can, not now," I cut him off, not looking away from my mother. "We'll talk later." The room hummed with tension. Aunt Rachel whispered too loudly to Uncle Paul. Cousin Margot looked uncomfortably at her plate. Griffin cleared his throat. "Maybe we should give Mom and Delaney a moment," he suggested. "Absolutely not." Vera snapped. "This is a family brunch." "She is not family, not anymore." I stood slowly, finally turning to face my sister. "I'll always be family, Vera. No matter how hard you try to erase me." "You erased yourself when you walked out that door," she hissed. "Ladies," Uncle Paul interjected awkwardly. "Perhaps this isn't the time or place." "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "this is exactly the time and place, because this isn't about me or my sister's feelings. This is about our mother's well-being." The room went still. I could feel Vera's fury from across the table, could see Julian's confusion, Griffin's concern. Auden sat perfectly still, watching. "What are you talking about?" Julian asked. Griffin stood. "We should talk in private, the three of us." "There's nothing to talk about," Vera insisted. "She's obviously here to cause trouble." "I didn't come here for validation," I said clearly, making sure everyone at the table could hear. "I came because someone's stealing from our mother." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Vera exploded. "How dare you," she shouted, standing so violently her chair tipped backward. "After abandoning this family, after leaving us to deal with everything while you were off doing God knows what, Vera," my mother said suddenly, her voice sharper than it had been. "Let her speak." Vera froze, clearly not expecting resistance from that quarter. I used the moment to signal Griffin, who slipped from the room to retrieve the documents we'd prepared. "Mom has early-stage dementia," I said to Julian directly. "She was diagnosed 2 years ago. Vera's been hiding it from you, from everyone. She's been manipulating Mom's medication, isolating her from people who might notice, and systematically draining her accounts." Julian's face went pale. He turned to our mother. "Mom, is this true? Are you sick?" Before she could answer, Vera cut in. "Of course it's not true. Mom's just getting older, having some memory issues, normal aging. Delaney is making this up to worm her way back into the family now that she's failed at whatever she ran off to do." That's when Auden, who had been silent throughout, stood up. In a clear, steady voice that carried across the dining room, he said, "She's my boss." The room froze. Every head turned toward Auden, then back to me, confusion written across their faces. "What did you just say?" Vera's voice was dangerously soft. Auden looked directly at me, then back at Vera. Delaney is my boss. I work for her company. Julian frowned. What company? Etherlock, Auden replied. One of the fastest growing data security firms in the country, founded and run by your sister, the one you all thought was a failure. The silence that followed was broken only by my mother's confused murmur, "You run a company?" I nodded, still processing what had just happened. This wasn't how I'd planned for this to go. Auden had just burned his cover completely, had just chosen a side publicly. There was no going back now. Vera recovered first, her laugh brittle and sharp. That's ridiculous. She dropped out of college. She's been living who knows where, doing who knows what. Building something, I said quietly. Something that matters. Griffin returned with a folder we'd prepared, handing it directly to Julian. You need to see this. As Julian flipped through the documents, bank statements showing large transfers from our mother's accounts, medical reports with conflicting information, the mortgage papers with a forged signature, his expression darkened. What the hell is this, Vera? He demanded. Vera's face had gone white. Those are fake. She's making this up to turn you against me. These are copies of official documents, I said. The originals are being examined by forensic accountants and handwriting experts as we speak. The extended family members looked increasingly uncomfortable. Aunt Rachel stood abruptly. Perhaps we should give you all some privacy to discuss this. Within minutes, the dining room had cleared of everyone except the immediate family and Auden. My mother sat at the head of the table looking confused and distressed. Julian paced by the windows, still going through the documents. Griffin stood by the door as if guarding it. Vera remained standing, her posture rigid with fury. I can explain all of this, she insisted. Mom asked me to handle her finances when she started having memory problems. Everything I've done has been to protect her assets. By taking out a mortgage on the house using a forged signature? Julian asked, his voice cold. By transferring hundreds of thousands of dollars to accounts only you can access? That's not what happened, Vera said, but her voice lacked conviction now. It's exactly what happened, Auden said. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and set it on the table. Vera's voice filled the room. Just give her the extra pill tonight. I need her asleep by 8. I've got people coming to look at the silver. No, she won't remember in the morning. She barely remembers what day it is anymore. Vera lunged for the phone, but Griffin intercepted her. There's more where that came from, he said quietly. You've been recording me? Vera spat. You're going to regret this. I know what you did, I'll make sure everyone knows. Go ahead, Auden said calmly. I'm not ashamed of exposing a company that falsified drug trial data. That's why I left corporate consulting in the first place. But what you've done to your own mother, that's something to be ashamed of. My mother's voice cut through the tension. What's happening? Why is everyone fighting? The bewilderment in her tone broke my heart. I went to her side, kneeling again by her chair. Mom, Vera's been lying to you. She's been taking your money, making you take too much medication, keeping you confused. That's not true, Vera insisted, her voice rising. Mom, don't listen to her. Delaney abandoned us, remember? She left when you needed her. I left because I didn't think I belonged here, I said, holding my mother's gaze. But I never stopped caring about you, and I'm not going to let anyone hurt you, even if it's your own daughter. Julian slammed the folder down on the table. Enough. This ends now. Griffin called Dr. Lipton. Tell him we need him to come evaluate Mom immediately. And call our family lawyer. You can't do this, Vera said, panic edging into her voice. I have power of attorney. I make the decisions for Mom now. A power of attorney obtained through deception isn't valid, I said. And I've already filed a petition to have it revoked pending investigation. Vera turned on me, her face contorted with rage. You think you can waltz back in here after 8 years and take over? You have no idea what I've been through, what I've had to deal with while you were off playing entrepreneur. This isn't about me versus you, Vera, I said, keeping my voice level. This is about mom's well-being, about doing what's right for her. You don't get to decide what's right for her. You gave up that right when you left. My mother's hand tightened around mine. Stop it, she said, her voice surprisingly firm. Stop fighting. We all fell silent. Mirabelle Rowe might be unwell, but in that moment she was still the mother who could silence a room with a word. Delaney, she said, looking at me with clearer eyes than I'd seen since arriving. You run a company? I nodded. Yes, Mom. One I built when you thought I was nothing. Something flickered across her face, surprise, perhaps even pride. Tell me about it. Before I could answer, Vera made a sound of disgust. This is ridiculous. She's lying to you, Mom. She's always been a liar. Enough, Vera, Julian said sharply. You've done enough damage. For the next hour, things moved quickly. Dr. Lipton arrived to evaluate my mother. The family lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, joined by video call to discuss next steps. Vera was never left alone, Griffin and Auden taking turns watching her while the rest of us sorted through the mess she'd created. By evening, the initial crisis had been contained. Vera's access to the family finances was frozen pending investigation. Dr. Lipton confirmed that my mother's medication dosage had been too high, likely contributing to her confusion. Julian initiated a full legal audit of all transactions made in the past 2 years. Vera left in a fury, promising lawsuits and retribution, but the evidence against her was overwhelming, and we all knew it. As the house finally quieted, I found myself alone with my mother in the living room. She sat in her favorite armchair, looking exhausted but somehow more present than she had earlier. I should have known something was wrong, she said softly. There were days when I couldn't remember what I'd done, conversations I had no memory of. Vera told me it was just age, that I was being forgetful. It wasn't your fault, I said, sitting across from her. Early dementia is treatable, manageable. With the right care, the right medication, the real dosage, you'll have many good years ahead. She studied me for a long moment. You've changed. Yes. Tell me about your company, the one you built. So I did. I told her about the early days of Etherlock, the struggles and setbacks, the gradual growth. I didn't exaggerate or minimize, just gave her the facts of what I'd accomplished. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I never expected to hear, I'm proud of you. 3 simple words I'd spent a lifetime waiting for. They didn't magically heal the past, didn't erase the years of criticism and disappointment, but they were a start. I always feared you'd fly too far to come home, she added softly. That you'd never look back. I didn't think I had a home to come back to, I admitted. She reached for my hand. You do now. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, medical appointments, and family reckonings. Julian initiated a full audit of the family finances, freezing Vera's access to all accounts and changing the locks on the house. The evidence against her was damning, nearly $500,000 diverted, documents forged, medical instructions deliberately altered. I expected to feel vindicated, even triumphant. Instead, I felt a deep sadness. My sister had betrayed her own family in the most fundamental way, had exploited our mother's vulnerability for personal gain. Whatever jealousy or resentment had driven her, it had corrupted her completely. Auden transitioned fully to his role at Etherlock, heading up a new division focused on identity protection for vulnerable populations, seniors, domestic violence survivors, witnesses requiring anonymity. His experience with Vera had given him insights that would help others. Griffin stepped up in ways that surprised me, taking a more active role in the family while balancing his own career. He checked on our mother daily, coordinated with her new care team, and became the steady presence she needed. As for me, I found myself in a strange limbo, not fully reintegrated into the family, but no longer the estranged daughter either. I split my time between the city and Ashenville, running my company remotely while helping stabilize the situation at home. My relationship with Julian improved gradually. We weren't close, too many years and differences separated us for that, but we developed a grudging respect for each other's strengths. He was methodical where I was intuitive, cautious where I was bold. Together we made a good team in addressing the mess Vera had created. "I should have seen it," he said one night as we sat in our father's old study reviewing financial documents. "I should have noticed something was wrong with Mom." "Vera was careful," I replied. "She made sure you only saw Mom on her good days, that you never stayed long enough to notice patterns. Still, she's our mother." He looked at me directly. "You saw it immediately, and you hadn't seen her in 8 years. I had help," I reminded him, thinking of Auden's evidence, Griffin's insights, even Kellen's casual mention of my mother's breakdown. "You came back when it mattered," he said finally. "That counts for something." Coming from Julian, this was high praise indeed. One afternoon, about a month after the confrontation, I found myself alone in the empty row house. My mother was at a doctor's appointment with Griffin, Julian had returned to New York temporarily, and the caregivers had the day off. I wandered through the rooms, touching familiar objects, studying old photographs. It felt strange to be there without the tension that had defined my childhood. The house seemed smaller, somehow less intimidating. In my mother's study, I found a drawer full of clippings, articles about technology startups, women entrepreneurs, cybersecurity innovations, some dated back years, long before the confrontation. She'd been following my career from a distance, even when we weren't speaking. The discovery brought tears to my eyes. Perhaps she'd cared more than she could express, had been proud in her own complicated way. As summer turned to fall, we settled into a new normal. My mother's condition stabilized with proper treatment. The dementia was still there, but the progression slowed significantly. She had good days and bad days, but even on the bad ones there was a peacefulness to her that hadn't been there under Vera's care. I purchased a small house in Ashenville, close enough to check on my mother regularly, but separate enough to maintain my independence. Etherlock continued to thrive, with a new satellite office in a nearby city that allowed me to be present for both my company and my family. Then, 6 months after the confrontation, a letter arrived from Vera. It had been forwarded through her lawyer, the envelope crisp and formal. Inside was a single sheet of expensive stationery, her precise handwriting filling half the page. "You think you've won. You haven't. I've spoken with Barrett Jenkins about writing a tell-all exposé of the Rowe family, including how the esteemed founder of Etherlock abandoned her sick mother for years. Prepare for the spotlight you've always avoided." I should have been angry, should have felt threatened. Instead, I felt a profound pity. Vera still didn't understand that this wasn't a competition, that I hadn't come back to claim some prize she thought she deserved. I showed the letter to Julian and Griffin. We agreed to have our lawyers handle any further communications to protect our mother from additional stress. The threatened exposé never materialized. Barrett Jenkins, it turned out, had more journalistic integrity than Vera anticipated, and her story was too obviously motivated by revenge to be credible. As for Auden, he thrived at Etherlock. Free from Vera's manipulation, he became an invaluable part of the team, eventually heading up our client protection division. We maintained a strictly professional relationship, but I valued his insights and the quiet integrity that had led him to stand up at that brunch and declare, "She's my boss." 1 year after the confrontation, we gathered at the Rowe house for my mother's 61st birthday. It was a small affair, just family and a few close friends. No pretense, no performance for the benefit of Ashenville society. My mother had a good day, remembering names and following conversations, laughing at Griffin's terrible jokes. When she opened my gift, a photo album I'd created documenting the growth of Etherlock, interspersed with family photos old and new, she smiled with genuine pleasure. "You've built something remarkable," she said, squeezing my hand. "Your father would have been proud." Coming from Mirabelle Rowe, this was the highest praise imaginable. Later, as the evening wound down, I found myself on the back porch, looking out at the garden my mother had once tended with such care. Griffin joined me, handing me a glass of wine. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. I smiled. Just thinking about how strange life is. A year ago I wasn't even invited to Mom's birthday. Now here we are. "A lot can change in a year," he agreed. "Do you ever hear from Vera?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not directly. Her lawyer communicates with ours occasionally about the legal proceedings. Last I heard, she'd moved to Chicago. The legal consequences for Vera had been significant but not catastrophic. She'd agreed to repay the misappropriated funds to avoid criminal charges, though the civil case was still ongoing. I sometimes wondered if we'd done the right thing in not pursuing harsher penalties, but our priority had been protecting our mother, not punishing Vera. Do you think she'll ever come back? I asked. Griffin shrugged. Maybe someday, when she's ready to take responsibility for what she did, not before. We stood in companionable silence, watching fireflies begin to appear in the twilight. The past year had changed all of us, revealed strengths and weaknesses we hadn't known we possessed, forced us to redefine what family meant. I didn't seek revenge or recognition when I returned to Ashenville. I just wanted truth and peace, and a seat at the table I built myself. It hadn't been easy. The road to reconciliation rarely is. But standing there in the gathering dusk, I felt something I hadn't expected to find in my childhood home: belonging. They didn't want me there. That's fine. I'm building my own room now, and this time I make the list.